Oh, yummy. Hi. So today we're talking about my favorite vampire film and its remake. We're talking about Fright Night. Fright Night.
It's chilly out here.
Oh, no, it isn't. It's beautiful.
I have two editions here. We've got the Eureka Cinema 4K restoration of the original Tom Holland film from 1985. And we have the 2011 remake on DVD featuring Anton Yelchin and Colin Farrell. Directed by Craig Gillespie. I've heard that name before. It's also got David Tennant, which is like the reason we got it, because, you know, David Tennant, vampire film. Hey, this could be cool. We got it like probably a year or two after it came out on DVD, to be honest. So we've had it for a while now. I saw that before I saw the original, but I'd forgotten about the original, and I'd forgotten what the happens in the film. Then I bought the original, which I'm pretty sure was meant to come with a booklet. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of a different film. To be fair, I do have a lot of Eureka films, so it does make sense that I have a lot of... Yeah, this is just purely video stuff, which is perfectly fine. So, what can I say about Fright Night? Well, notably, yeah, I have deemed it my favourite vampire film, which is interesting. I've grown up with vampire films, and it's like, you got your shit like Twilight, but then you got stuff like, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, then you got the Hammer horror films, you got the more classic Nosferatu, or the, Bram Stoker's Dracula, but a lot of them are very romantic, and I don't mind that. There's always a romantic notion between with vampire films as it is, because that's kind of like the big deal outside of, the blood-sucking creatures. Mostly with vampire films, you have the obvious sexual subtext, whether it being more romanticized, like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, or even the original Universal Dracula film with Bela Lugosi. But then you got something like Fright Night, which is like, hey, this is something different.
Who are you who interrupts my nightly feeding?
I am Peter Vincent, Vampire Killer.
So, what happens in Fright Night? Pretty much a teenage kid realizes that his next door neighbor who's just moved in is a vampire, and he has to prove it. And of course, the vampire gets, he more or less accuses the vampire before, getting back up, and the vampire comes to kill him. So the only way to defend himself is to get the help of, is it Patrick Vince? What is the fuck? I just watched the movie of TV. Oh, God. Maybe I should. What is it? Oh, wow. There is actually a lot of written stuff here. Let me just read this. He's sweet, sexy, and he likes to get in late. You might think he's the perfect neighbor, but before this, why is there a... Oh, you might think he's the perfect neighbor. Full stop. But someone failed their English class. Anyway, but before inviting him in for a nightcap, there's something you should know. Jerry prefers his drinks warm, red, and straight from the jugular. That's... I was going to say, that's right. It's Fright Night, a horrific apparently I can't read at 12 o'clock at night. It's Fright Night, a horrific howl starring Chris Sarandon as the seductive vampire, and William Ragsdale as the frenetic teenager struggling to keep Jerry's deadly fangs out of his neck. Only 17-year-old Charlie Brewster, played by Ragsdale, knows Jerry's blood-curdling secret. When Charlie can't get anyone to believe him, he turns to TV horror host Peter Vincent, played by Roddy McDowall, who used to be the great vampire killer of the movies. Can these mortals save Charlie and his sweetheart Amy from the wrathful bloodsucker's toothy embrace? If you love being scared, Fright Night will give you the nightmare of your life. This is Fright Night. The first one's very 80s. It's kind of campy, but it also very much wears its inspiration on its sleeves, to the point that the main characters are literally watching vampire films. There's a lot about this film, like how the main character, his best friend, is really, like, one of the, like, fucking out of the blue characters who's like, this guy's actually really great. Why isn't he our main character? Because he'd be a bit annoying. But he's fun, zany side characters. We love fun, zany side characters. Show stealers, as they also call them. There's a very small cast. It's a very simple idea. Kids in high school go to take on vampires because, their friend believes that the neighbor's a vampire and thinks he's going to die. So it's like, hey, well, because we think that our best friend, because me, female character, who thinks her boyfriend is going to kill a human being, I'm going to enlist the other friend, the Wayne Zaki friend, Wayne Zaki, zany and wacky. That's the one I'm looking for. I'm tired. And they obviously get the TV host, and they go and take down the vampire. But is he a vampire? Oh, we need proof first. But then, no, all the proof turns flawless because they're all like, nah, we're just playing along, it's all a gag. Until, Peter Vincent, realizes that the vampire, you can't see his reflection. And he's like, oh my god. It's an interesting film. It's fun. It's got great, 80s effects. Tom Holland directed it. It's really fun. It's interesting for me because I just watched all these vampire films that were like, hey, guess what? Vampire is there, but no one's going to find out about it. You need a Van Helsing character or someone who knows about vampires before any of the innocent people can know about vampires. But instead, it's like in the fucking first scene, the main character, whose girlfriend is literally saying, hey, it's time, we've been dating for a year, let's have sex. And he sees out the window, the neighbor's bringing a coffin into their cellar, and he's like, basement, and he's like, hold on a second. And he completely disregards his girlfriend to just pay attention to the people next door, because he's like, this is kind of weird. But she's like, hey, I'm horny, and I'm, anxious about this because she's nervous, she's shy, she doesn't really, she's not fully confident with this anyway. She's not like an over-the-top slutty character or whatever, because she's real. And so then that's where the plot kicks off, because he realizes that the next door neighbor is a vampire when he finds out that the prostitute that he saw out of his house, in front of his house, who went to that neighbor's house, dies, and they find her body with the head chopped off, and it's like, holy shit, my next door neighbor's a vampire, to the point that he literally watches him release his fangs and about to kill a girl, and then the neighbor's like, Jerry the vampire realizes, wait, hold on a second, there's a guy watching me right now from the window. Oh shit. So, of course, then Jerry, our main character is then like, shit, I gotta talk to someone about this, and the only person he knows is Evil Ed, his best friend, who hates being called evil, and he's like, hey, I'll pay you $8 if you tell me all about vampires. And he's like, oh, well, there's this, there's that, and whatever. Not a lot of stuff, but some necessary stuff. He doesn't tell him about the stakes, the wood and stakes, and how that can kill vampires and shit. Instead, he's like, oh, crucifixes and holy water and garlic, and don't let them inside your house. Like, the homeowner can't. If the homeowner lets them inside the house, then they can, then they can get inside the house. Otherwise, they can't normally. And so, like, a scene later, instead of the kid being like, Mum, don't let the neighbor inside the house, none of that shit. Instead, he goes up to his room, puts all this shit around his room, and then when he comes downstairs to, like, maybe get some dinner or something, he realizes that the fucking vampire's inside his house because his mum let him in. And it's like, well, there you go. The cats have a bag, and Jerry goddamn well knows that he's a vampire. And it just goes from there. And, it has its obvious discernible acts. Kid tries to tell everyone that, next door neighbor's a vampire. Next act, everyone's like, it becomes, the first half of the next act is more or less like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, let's see if this guy's a vampire. Then, holy shit, he's a vampire. And then Evil Ed gets taken, the girlfriend gets kidnapped, and the main character has to go to Peter Vincent and be like, we gotta kill him and save my girlfriend. But then you also gotta fight Evil Ed, because he's now a vampire. And yeah, it's fun. It has some great effects. The obvious sex appeal is there from the what was his name? Chris Sarandon as the vampire, as Jerry. And it's fun. It's a good film. It's got some, again, the great effects, which is the most charming aspect about it. But I like how it does this, how it's like straight away, bam, vampire. It tells you up front of what's going on, because you know what you're going to get. You know it's a vampire film. The fact that they're watching vampire films would make you think that they're going to use that contextually as, oh, well, these films have taught me how to watch, how to kill vampires. But obviously, they haven't actually... The only one who has been watching these films isn't the main character and his girlfriend, because they've been making out the whole time while these films are on in the background. Instead, it's Evil Ed who's been watching these films, to the point that he even, when he talks to Peter Vincent, he's like, I used to be such a fan of yours until I realized how much of a scam all of your movies were and whatever, and how phony it was. So obviously he learned how to kill vampires from Peter Vincent's movies. And it's an interesting film overall, very fun. Then there's the remake. I still really like the remake. I don't think it's a bad film. It has its dated CGI effects, but that's like a curse of the time period. It's gonna happen. But this one, which is just a bit shorter of a film, actually still has story. It's actually still written by Tom Holland. So Tom Holland still wrote this film, but he's like, okay, so these guys want to remake my film. What I'm going to do is I'm going to completely contribute. I'm not going to direct it, but I don't know if he produces it. I don't really care if he does or not. I don't think he does. No. But he's like, hey, I'll write the film. It'll be a semi-remake of the original in terms of, the story narrative, nerdy kid realizes that there's a vampire next door. His family don't believe him. And then, they have to kill the vampire because of whatever happens. But just when you think it's going to be like that, literally this film having Colin Farrell as a vampire and making it dead fucking obvious that he's a vampire from the get-go. Which I also love, because the Evil Ed character, aka, our main character's best friend, is already a vampire hunter, has already realized that, so that's already a different thing. And then he gets captured by the vampire, and you're like, oh shit, where'd he go? He's gone for almost the rest of the film. He comes back, like, in the second act. He becomes a vampire. It's a very obvious thing, because it's, again, happens to the best friend, but this is a different circumstance, a different style of character, which is kind of cool, instead of it being like, hey, he becomes, like Evil Ed becomes a vampire because he doesn't believe in the vampire shit, and he apparently gets bullied at school. They don't really show that. Jerry makes it a thing of like, you won't get bullied again, you'll be, treated fairly and whatever, and apparently Evil Ed accepts that, even though we haven't seen any of that happening to him. We haven't seen anyone bullying him. Maybe there was a scene originally written up like that and it got cut out. I don't know. Either way, it could just be the whole vampire thing, I am, possessing you, or, controlling you, mind control, that BS. Which makes sense. Say whatever you need to lure them into your hidey hole, and then bite the crap out of them. But in the remake, the guy's already a vampire hunter, more or less. He guesses that it's a vampire because it's like, well, it's the perfect place. We're in Las Vegas. It's a suburban town that's built specifically for people to work at Las Vegas. Everyone works during the nighttime, sleeps during the day, very vampire-esque, so it's a perfect place for a vampire to make a settlement. Then, of course, he gets captured and becomes a vampire. Our main character still believes that finds out, like, he's like, oh, well, my old best friend, who I'm not really friends with anymore because I'm with the cool kids now and have a hot girlfriend, suddenly, this is Anton Yelchin's character, suddenly that guy who was the vampire hunter's disappeared, and he's like, shit, I should go find out. So he goes to his house, realizes that he has all this evidence that Jerry is a vampire, and even he's thinking, Jerry the Vampire? That's such a dumb name. Obviously a joke on the original film, because they get it. Tom Holland gets it. He's riffing on his original film. And then, Anton Yelchin's character, I don't even know what the fuck his name is. Charlie Brewster. Well, that's convenient. So Charlie Brewster goes to... He pretty much he goes to the actual vampire hunter dude. So this is played by David Tennant, who is, of course, Patrick... No, it's not. It's Peter Vincent, yeah. And so you know, he's a Las Vegas magician, so it's more modernized for it to be like, oh, it's a vampire show in Las Vegas, so it's even more phony to amp up the kind of comedic aspect, because this film is going for more of a horror comedy. Personally, I think it fails at being a horror comedy. It does do a horror action film, but the comedy doesn't really land. It's like a satire on its original self more than a comedy straight up, or a riff on the genre, so it didn't really manage to succeed in being a comedy, which is disappointing. And you could tell from the bloopers that they tried to make it more of a comedy, but the comedy aspects were mostly improv, and it didn't work. So they cut that shit out. And so, you know, David Tennant's character doesn't believe him, yada yada yada, but he leaves some photos behind, which of course, you know, oh, he looks at the photos, realizes that it's something similar to what he has in his vault, whatever the fuck. The thing that makes this film different is when Colin Farrell, Jerry, goes to try and enter their house, and, you know, Charlie is, you know, tells his girlfriend and his mother, don't let him in, you know, and Colin, you know, Jerry's like, I'll call, you know, he's been abusing me and whatever, he's been spying on me, I'll call the authorities. So the mum just decides, well, go call the authorities. So he goes into his house, grabs a shovel, comes back out, goes around the back of the house, because they're all safe inside the house, of course, and he digs up the gas main, you know, the gas pipe, and, you know, pulls it out a little so everything inside the house that has the gas pipe attached gets yanked a little, because of course he has super strength. I love too when he starts digging up, it's digging up little blocks of earth, because of course it's all fake, more or less, which is again kind of a joke, but it doesn't feel appropriate for the scene, because it's like, it's meant to be a tense horror scene of like, what the hell's this guy doing? He's digging up the backyard, what the fuck? It's meant to be tense and just in your face, but then he's just digging up these big blocks. I mean, it's obviously a lot quicker than, you know, digging up dirt pile, but like, he digs up these big blocks and gets the gas main, and he blows the fucking house up.
Don't need an invitation if there's no house.
You know, no need to welcome me in if there's no house. And it's like, holy shit, this film has just gone big, it's exploded, literally. So then they get in the car, they drive the fuck out of there, Jerry's chasing them, throws a dirt bike, almost kills them, then crashes into them, almost kills them again. The mama faints, they bring her to the hospital, and they kind of just, like, bury her for the rest of the film. They're like, oh, she's in hospital, she's very religious, that's why there's all these crosses around and shit.
Gonna see the Peter Vincent.
Oh, it's underwhelming, believe me, but he's what we've got. Mom's very religious.
So it's like, you know, in the first film, it's like the mother disappears because she has to do night shifts, so it's actually in the narrative as to why she disappears, and they reference it twice. She says it, and then the vampire kid who's in her bed with the Raggedy Ann hair on says it.
Mrs. Brewster, thank God the phone wires have been cut. I know.
Oh, she left the message, she left the dinner in the oven, you know.
She left a note. His dinner's in the oven.
It's kind of funny. And so, then Toni Collette, who plays her mother, is out for the rest of the film. Charlie and his girlfriend go to find, you know, they go to talk to David Tennant's character, Peter Vincent, and all this kind of shit. And it just goes on from there. They get attacked while they're there, and then they got to escape back. You know, they're like, hey, we got to find, you know, Jerry's house, because that's where he's taken, you know, because they go for a club, the girlfriend gets taken in quite a really intense scene where she gets kidnapped in a club, and of course, you know, Anton Yelchin's been dragged away, he can't, because of all the security being like, oh, you know, where's your ID? I don't have an ID, well, you're coming with me, and just watching his girlfriend get the life sucked out of her. It's a really impactful scene that is really well done. The contrast between these two films already is that outside of the obvious narrative shifts and some character shifts, the girlfriend doesn't have this. In the original, there's a portrait that is a picture of her, of the girlfriend, but from like 100 or so years ago, who was obviously a previous love interest to Jerry the vampire. Very obvious cliche. In this one, it's just like, nah, this kid's trying to kill me. I'm gonna take his girl. It's like a damsel in distress thing, but he still changes her into a vampire, and it's semi-sexual, but it's not as in your face. The original is very, very sexual to the point that, you know, she's in a Marilyn Monroe dress, and when he bites into her, she orgasms. Like, it's pretty fucking blatant. Also, she's in high school. Should we be concerned? I don't know, because I'm pretty sure they're in like late high school, so 17, 18, they can drive. So realistically, it might not be pedophilia. So I guess it's fine? I don't really know. It's America. They have different rules there. Either way, it's a vampire film. You can get away with it, I guess. Nevertheless, there's that obvious contrast between the two love interests. And then they get to the final act, where Anton Yelchin is all dressed up and he's ready in his big-ass suit with a crossbow and everything, and then you got David Tennant pops in and he's like, alright, sure, I'll come and help you out, I might as well, you know, because he doesn't think he has the confidence to do it, and, you know, Anton Yelchin's like, well, I don't ever want to be like you, because he's missing a father figure, so it makes sense to contextually reference that, saying that, because, of course, Peter Vincent was attacked by a vampire as a kid, which there is no... So he's actually seen real vampires and believes in them, but has chosen to believe that they weren't real and has hence malformed them into this show that he does. Whereas the Peter Vincent in the original film is just an actor. He just does vampire films and then is a TV show host of all these vampire films. So it makes sense. You know, they have their two different backstory and context for why they're related to vampires. It makes sense. He doesn't believe, in the original, he doesn't believe that vampires are real. Until he does, and he's like, oh my god, this is terrifying. And I kind of like that. The original was like, everything about these vampires is fucking terrifying. Like, they're genuinely scared that these vampires exist. And also, when they kill them, it's heartbreaking. Like, when they kill Evil Ed, spoilers, who turns into a fucking wolf. It's this grotesque scene of him going from a wolf into a boy again. And just Peter Vincent's there crying. Like, this is the worst thing I have ever experienced in my whole entire life. And then about 5 minutes later, guess who's back? It's like they have the familiar, I believe they are, which is like the vampire's like assistant dude. But he's kind of still, he's a human, but he has vampire-ish powers. To some degree, like some kind of strength, plus you shoot him wherever and he doesn't die, so they stake him in the heart and he just turns to this green goop and oozed and just turns into a skeleton before their eyes, and they're fucking mortified. Which is to be completely fair, I would be too if I saw a person melt in front of me. Like, holy shit, have you seen, what is it, the third Indiana Jones film? Where the guy turns into an old man in front of the girl and she's just screaming her head off because it's like, what the fuck, get away from me, and he won't let go of her and he just turns into this ghoul. Oh, that was a fucking nightmarish scene. Wait, it's the same kind of idea. And so the final acts of both of these two films take place in Jerry's house, but one goes upstairs, the other goes downstairs. In the Jerry's house one, they realize that they know that he's got a secret back room. They go in there, see the girlfriend in one of the rooms, and then she falls through the floor. They open the door up, there's a trap door. They go in, and there's this big empty room underground. And then they explore this underground house, which has one gag where they're looking through this dark area, and then this music is building up, and Peter Vincent, played by David Tennant, looks over and just turns the light on. That's the gag. Anyway, then they go into the next room and they see the girl there. And so, you know, Anton Yelchin gets trapped in the room, Peter Vincent gets thrown back by Jerry the vampire, and then Jerry the vampire, because his difference in this version compared to the original, there are 4 vampires. There is Jerry, there is the human vampire, I don't really know what the fuck he's called, he might still be a familiar. They never really explain it in the film. They have, obviously, Amy, the love interest, who becomes a vampire, and they have to kill the main vampire so she can, you know, before dawn, so she can become a human again. And they have, obviously, the kid vampire, you know, Evil Ed, which is, you know, it's again, tight-knit cast. And the last act of the film is very simple. They fight and kill everyone in the house, they kill Jerry, in this long, elongated scene. They get him into the basement, they start smashing all the windows, and they use the sunlight to make him explode. It's simple as that, because it's past dawn, yet apparently, well, they kill him, and he explodes, and it's amazing. And then the girl becomes a human. But then when, the mum's still got these night shifts, this is the epilogue pretty much, and the main two characters finally decide, I guess they maybe have sex. It's not really implied. They're just laying down on his bed, making out, while Peter Vincent's show is on, and he's like, we're not going to talk about vampire films anymore, because he's back on TV now, because he pretty much quit. And he's like, instead we're going to lock them away, isn't that right, kid whose name I kept forgetting, fucking Charlie. So he obviously says that to Charlie through the camera, and says, we're going to do alien films now. Because, of course, that's actually how it went in the 80s, where they developed from older, horror, vampire, Frankenstein movies to 50s sci-fi. That's just how those shows were, like Elvira and shit like that, That's how that stuff was. So, it's all referential to the period of time. And then, you see a glimmer of light coming through the neighbor's house, and, Charlie's like, huh? But he doesn't see it again, and so he goes, he's like, nope, it's all done, I'm just imagining things, and he goes to probably have sex with his girlfriend. And then you go back to the window, you see another glint of the eyes, and you hear Evil Ed's laugh, which obviously implies that he's still alive, which is fair enough, because the last time you saw him, he was staked and dead, but he never, exploded or anything, so it's like, maybe because he was too young of a vampire, he didn't explode, but obviously they're trying to imply that he was still alive. Just for the gag, more or less. They don't really do anything in the sequel, trust me. But then going back to the remake, when they finally get to this basement layer, it's again Charlie against his girlfriend, who is turned into a vampire. But then Charlie gets back into the room where David Tennant's character is, where Peter Vincent is, who has found out that because this vampire is so old, he's a part of this cult, pretty much. He makes a following of vampires, which is a nice universe-building thing. It's a particular style of vampire that uses, that gets other people and turns them into vampires to make a big kind of army. And so, suddenly all these vampires start crawling out of the wall, including Dave Franco's character, who was there earlier in the film, got attacked, and you're just like, wait, what the fuck? He just got attacked and killed? In the middle of the day? Not really, but at dusk. And then you never see them again until they find out that, they're actually being vampires this whole time, just buried in the walls. And then they, of course, go after Peter Vincent. They almost kill him. They start turning him into a vampire. But then Charlie ends up... they've got one point of light because they've used a shotgun to shoot some light, which is where David Tennant starts burning. He's like, oh shit, I'm turning into one of them. And, Jerry's like, well, we've got all day. Once the daylight runs out, you're dead, pretty much. So he starts making out with Amy, I believe her name is. Is her name still Amy in this version? I have honestly no idea. He starts making out with the girlfriend in front of Charlie because Jerry's a dick. And so apparently Charlie has this plan that Peter Vincent had mentioned earlier. Just light the guy on fire and stake him in the chest. Well, how can I do that how can I get close to a guy who's on fire? And he's like, oh yeah, that's a good point. So what he does is he puts on this flame retardant suit, he's had it on the whole time, but then he covers his face completely with it, puts himself on fire, jumps onto the main vampire, they have a whole tussle, the vampire catches on fire, and then Peter Vincent shoots, he grabs the shotgun, because it was a distance away, starts shooting around more, to open more sunlight area, throws the stake, which is blessed by Saint Peter, which is kind of it was mentioned earlier, and they bring it with them. It's like, well, hey, if Amy's been turned into a vampire, you should use this. If it kills the main vampire, then you'll be able to bring her back. Everyone that has turned into a vampire will become human again. It's like, well, that's fucking convenient, but against a vampire film, it makes fucking sense. It's either you kill them all, or you have some kind of a way to retcon in the fact that the love interest can become a human again. That's just how they do it. That's how vampire films work, alright? It's all make-believe anyway. And so he, of course, stabs Jerry with the stake, everyone, like, and he slowly starts exploding. He turns into this big CGI vampire thing and then just explodes. And then everyone becomes human again. And it's like, yay. And then the main two characters have sex in Peter Vincent's apartment. And that's it. That's the movie. So, yeah, this has already been a long video. I don't know. Why did I want to explain the plot? Because as much as you could argue one is better than the other, which I'd still say the original's better than the remake. However, the remake could have been better if they had have used more practical effects. Of course, they overdid the CGI. It wasn't too terrible. It's not too over the top. It's noticeable here and there. They still have some practical effects, but for the most part, it's a 2010-11 film, so it makes sense that it has all this stuff to it. It's if it was made today, then like, I mean, obviously not during the pandemic. If it was made in like from 2015, maybe 2016 onwards, maybe 2017 onwards even, then they probably may have used practical effects. But like, they obviously had decided to use CGI for a lot of the effects from the get-go, which is disappointing. But yeah, I mean, it's not like The Thing, the 2011 version, where they had all these practical effects filmed and everything and then decided to just completely re-edit it with CGI. That's a completely different story. That's just the producers being dicks. But yeah, so you have obviously the jump in technology. It's modern. The new one is set in present day, which is nice. And it is a completely different change of pace, where instead of it being a long period of time where the characters don't believe him that that Jerry's a vampire, instead it's like Jerry's like, nah, fuck this, I'm just gonna kill you all so then I can move on with my life and build my army. I don't have to deal with your shit. And it's like, holy fuck, okay, what the hell's happening here? So that's like a nice contrast. It uppens the pace, makes it more of an action horror film. Again, they're still trying to do comedy. I don't think it works. I didn't even realize that this was meant to be a horror comedy until someone actually said on Letterboxd, this horror comedy. I'm thinking, no, what? I'm sorry, this is a horror action film. What the fuck are you talking about? This is not a comedy. It has comedic moments, not to like relieve tension or anything. It just has comedic moments. I mean, outside that one part where he turns in the light, that's to relieve tension of, oh, the suspense is killing me. It wasn't killing me. And yeah, in contrast to the original, well, how do I say it? The casting on both is very unique. Peter Vincent in both films is great. Obviously, David Tennant in the remake is amazing. He feels a slight bit over the top, but at the same time, it makes sense for his character because he's a drunk because of the torment that he, the fact that he watched his family get killed by a vampire, and the fact that he does this, show in Las Vegas, so he's an asshole. It makes sense. Whereas Roddy McDowall's character is kind of depressed. He's been fired from his show because it's not getting the ratings, or at least he quit from the show because it's not getting the ratings. I always interpreted it as he got fired, but then he came back to the show to be like, hey, let's not do vampires this time. Let's do other films, Maybe that the kids are more into it these days in the 80s, which is like 50s and 60s sci-fi films. Whatever, that's just how TV was. Obviously, Chris Sarandon as Jerry is terrific. He is brutal, he is pretty horrifying, and he's got a great 80s sex appeal to him. Like, pretty much every fucking time he's with Amy, yeah, no, I'd fuck him too. It's incredible. He's amazing. Colin Farrell is also really fucking good. I really like his version as well. They both have that really great, hot and sexy kind of thing, but of course they have very different periods of it, whereas, Chris Sarandon feels very 80s, whereas Colin Farrell's feels very 2010s. They both have a very different time period of appeal, which I like. It's a good differentiation. Also, I like that, the Jerry in the old version is just him and his familiar, and they're just killing girls or whatever every night, simple shit. And then, he realizes that Amy looks like this girl that he was in love with however many centuries ago. So, hey, let's kidnap her and turn her into a vampire, because that works. I can use my vampire magic to make her fall in love with me. That's convenient. Yay, 80s. Whereas, of course, this one is like, no, we're not going to bother with that shit. Instead, he's making an army because we want to have this big action scene. But instead of it being, to be fair, I think the whole final part, once they're, like, buried surrounded by the light. I feel like could have been better. I feel like they could have killed off a few of the vampires there. They don't really, like, they do kill off like one or two people that you don't know that are vampires that pose just as much threat as everyone else. So it's like, oh well, how the odds really changed. And of course the big boss fight where he turns on fire and then jumps onto the onto Jerry and then stabs him is a good idea. I feel like it could have lasted longer, but at the same time, it just being them rolling around on fire probably wouldn't have lasted longer anyway. And I feel like the whole wrap-up should have been longer too. Like, it should have been... everything feels too short at the end of the film. You know, like the final 10 minutes is, we kill Jerry and then the main two characters have sex. Simple as that. You know, it's like, yeah, does it work? So, like, the epilogue doesn't feel... It just feels like it's just, we start this film on? They were having sex. Alright, well that's what we did the last film. We'll do it again this time. Fuck what everyone else says. The mother's fine. She's just calling from home saying, are you guys alright? You know, I don't know where you are, but you should be alright. Like, come on, dude, just tell your mum you're going to the city to fuck your girlfriend. God damn it. And, yeah, so... Jesus. And the whole... What the fuck does Peter Vincent do now? Like, does he just get a new show or something? Like, you know... the girlfriend characters, I believe they're both called Amy. Either way, the new one with Imogen Poots, I believe, is played by her. It doesn't actually say. What the fuck? Anton Yelchin, Colin Farrell, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, who's the best friend, who, we'll talk about him in a second, David Tennant and Toni Collette. It doesn't even mention Imogen Poots. Oh my god. She's fine in this. She's perfectly good for the role and does it as perfectly as she needs to, but she's not as outstanding, I'd say, as the original version of Amy, played by potentially Amanda Bearse. Amanda Bearse. Amanda Bearse is great in the original. Like, she goes from, like, you know, she loves, you know, Charlie, yeah, and she wants to be with him, and then, but he's being... Like, he wants to have sex with her, but then suddenly because of this vampire shit, he's been completely distracted from her, to the point that even she says, you know, he says, oh, he's a vampire and all this kind of shit, and she's like, is this just a joke in your way to try and get back with me? You know, as if, like, because obviously she wants to get back with him, but he's like, no, this is real, and she's like, oh, you're not, oh, you know, like, a really good moment right there. And that's when you realize that she's a great character already, and a great character, like, her actress is already playing the character to a great level. But then when they're in the club, when she starts dancing with Jerry, and suddenly her hair gets all flared up, very like fucking Zulu. Is it Zulu? Whatever the fuck the evil chick dude god thing in Ghostbusters is called. Like, the hair is up and everything. It's just like, wait, who the fuck did her hair up? What's going on here? She's semi-possessed. It's very sexual. And of course then Jerry kills two of the fucking goddamn bouncers. It's like, what the fuck? It's pretty great, actually. You thought he'd just run away with the girl, but instead, no, he fucking kills the bouncers and then runs away with the girl, just to prove how fucking awesome he is. And then later in the film, when she's becoming more of a vampire, her hair becomes longer, she becomes still more sexual, but more horrific. Like, there is a great image, which I will show here, of her, like, her jaws all the way open, she's got these great fangs and everything. It's fucking horrifying. It's like,
You promised you wouldn't let him get me. You promised.
Amy.
like, the same thing happens to Amy in the remake. It's obviously CGI in the remake, but it's like, dude, I would never let her, like, if this couple likes blowjobs, that is a big no-no from this girl from now on. Like, holy shit, if my girlfriend pulled that kind of a goddamn mouth on me, I'd say, get the fuck away from me. Like, that's just, Anyway. So, yeah, I'd say that Amy in the original version, played by Amanda Bearse, is a whole lot better. And, of course, last but not least, you have Evil Ed in the original. I don't know what he's called in the remake, but he's played by Christopher Mintz-Plasse? I don't know. He's pretty fun in the remake. He's a fun enough character, I think, in both films. He's obviously more outstanding in the original because there's lot more screen time dedicated to him. Also because he's just kind of a trickster. He just kind of fucks around because he can. And it's just more fun that way. And then when his character becomes a vampire, he's still the same shit. He's still fucking around with people, but now he can kill them, and it's kind of scary. And he's taken away from us far too soon. It's like, it kind of weird that Peter Vincent's the one who has to take him down, but it's like, I guess it makes sense. Like, there's no real thematic or connection to it, really, outside of just, it gives Peter Vincent faith to some degree, but not to a great degree that makes him able to face off against Jerry when they end up facing off. It's the Dawn that really gives him faith, because he knows that Jerry's fucked. He's like, I got all the faith now, bitch. Anyway, I love that part where Jerry crushes the crucifix. It's great. Like in the remake, how he grabs the crucifix, but because, Charlie doesn't have enough faith, it just burns in his hand to a crisp, and it's like, hey, that's pretty cool as well. That's a good use of that kind of an effect. And yeah, in the remake's version, I like how he starts off as like this kind of nerdy kid, but who's still a vampire hunter, because he's like, dude, your neighbor is a vampire, I know this. Well, it's like, because I've been stalking him and shit. And so then he gets fucked up. He gets fucked over and turns into a vampire. And then when he comes back as a vampire, he's actually pretty cool. He loses an arm, they get into a fight, and then he eventually gets killed off. Which sucks, obviously, because he's a fun character. But yeah, overall in terms of rating, I gave the original one 4 stars, 4 out of 5 stars. And the remake 3.5 out of 5. 3.5 out of 5, yeah, exactly, 3.5 stars. I would suggest watching both. I'd go with the original first, then the remake. You can watch them back to back, but it's almost the same story. It's bare bones, it's the same story. Kid realizes his neighbor's a vampire. His friends help him with a TV host or a celebrity vampire hunter personnel to kill the vampires. Simple as that, They lose their best friend along the way, the girlfriend gets kidnapped, and turns into a vampire. Gotta kill the main vampire dude to bring back the girlfriend, make her human again. Same deal on this bare bones nature, but obviously Tom Holland realized I shouldn't just remake my original, I should at least change something to it. Adapt it to the times, the pacing and everything. And yeah, so I guess that's kind of my argument as to why it's my favourite vampire film. It's not really a great argument. I think more or less the reason why it's my favourite vampire film is because it's different. It's something different, and I liked it. I even like that the remake is still something different from its original, but still similar enough. And yeah. What's your favourite vampire film? Feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. Comment down below what your favourite vampire film is, and I might check it out. Cool. Bye. That's all I gotta say. It's been too long. Yeah. Ciao.
It's chilly out here.
Oh, no, it isn't. It's beautiful.